Sarah never imagined that a simple Thanksgiving dinner would turn into the most humiliating day of her life. Her 6-year-old daughter was forced to eat on the floor like an animal, while the whole family watched in silence. The pain of that moment destroyed Sarah inside, but it also ignited a flame of relentless determination. A year later, she bought their house and evicted them without mercy. This is the story of how humiliation transformed into revenge and a new beginning. Some stories mark our lives forever. There are moments so painful that they completely change who we are and the path we take. Sarah was a dedicated, hard-working mother who only wanted her daughter Lily to grow up surrounded by love and respect. But life doesn't always follow the path we plan. On that Thanksgiving day, everything changed. What should have been a family celebration turned into a nightmare Sarah would never forget. The humiliation her daughter suffered in that house not only broke her heart, but awakened an inner strength she didn't even know she possessed. This is the story of a mother who transformed pain into power, humiliation into determination, and revenge into justice. A story about dignity, resilience, and a mother's unconditional love for her daughter. What city and country are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Sarah drove through the streets of Chicago that cold November morning with a tightness in her chest. Beside her, in the passenger seat, was Lily, her 6-year-old daughter, wearing a light blue dress Sarah had bought especially for the occasion. The little girl gazed out the window with bright eyes, excited about Thanksgiving dinner at her paternal grandmother's house. "Mommy, is Grandma Margaret going to make the turkey with that delicious gravy?" Lily asked in a sweet, expectant voice. Sarah forced a smile. "Yes, my love. Everything will be very beautiful today." But inside, Sarah felt something different. Since Michael's divorce 2 years ago, visits to his family home had become increasingly tense. Margaret, his former mother-in-law, had never hidden her disapproval of her son's marriage to Sarah. To Margaret, Sarah was never good enough. He came from a simple family. He had no money, no status. And after the divorce, that antipathy had turned into something much worse. Sarah parked the car in front of the large red brick house where Margaret lived. It was an imposing house, with a well-kept garden and a front door that seemed to judge who approached. Sarah took a deep breath, picked up the apple pie she had prepared, and got out of the car. Lily jumped excitedly, holding her mother's hand as they climbed the porch steps. Even before the doorbell rang, the door opened. Margaret was there, her gray hair perfectly styled, wearing an elegant wine-colored dress and a pearl necklace. Her icy blue eyes swept over Sarah from head to toe before landing on Lily. "Lily, dear, come in," Margaret said with a forced smile. Then she looked at Sarah. Sarah. That's all. Just the name, dry and cold as the November wind. Sarah entered the house holding Lily's hand. The living room was tastefully decorated, with dried flowers in crystal vases, scented candles, and a huge dining table already set with fine china and crystal glasses. Everything was perfect. Everything was impeccable, as always. Michael was sitting on the sofa, fiddling with his phone. When he saw Sarah and Lily, he simply nodded. He didn't even get up to greet his daughter. Victoria, Michael's sister, was in the kitchen helping Margaret. She looked at Sarah with that same look of disdain that had become so familiar. "Hi, Aunt Victoria," said Lily, running up to her. Victoria bent down and gave the girl a quick hug, but her smile vanished as soon as she looked at Sarah again. "You can leave the pie there on the counter," Victoria said, pointing indifferently. Sarah placed the pie where indicated and returned to the living room. Lily had gone to play with some toys that Margaret kept in a basket near the fireplace. The girl seemed happy, oblivious to the tension that hung in the air like a heavy cloud. "Lily, come wash your hands. Dinner is almost ready," Margaret ordered. Everyone sat down at the table, Margaret at the head, Michael on one side, Victoria on the other. Sarah and Lily sat in the chairs furthest away, almost like unwelcome guests at an exclusive party. The turkey was in the center of the table, golden and fragrant. Around it were bowls of mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, green beans, and homemade bread. Margaret began serving the dishes with that rigid, controlled posture. Sarah watched everything in silence, feeling her discomfort grow with each passing second. Lily, however, was radiant, staring at all that food with wide eyes. "Lily, sit up straight," Margaret said firmly when the girl shifted in her chair. "Yes, Grandma," Lily replied promptly, straightening her posture. Margaret served everyone except Sarah. Sarah's plate was the last one, placed before her with an almost disdainful gesture. Sarah swallowed her anger and picked up her fork, trying to maintain her composure for Lily's sake. The conversation at the table was artificial. Michael talked about work. Victoria commented on a trip she was planning to take. No one spoke to Sarah. It was as if she were invisible. Lily tried to participate, talking about things from school, but was constantly interrupted or ignored. Then it happened. Lily was drinking orange juice when she tripped over her own elbow and knocked over the glass. The orange liquid spilled onto the spotlessly white tablecloth, staining everything. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret stood up slowly, her eyes fixed on Lily. The girl began to tremble, her eyes filling with tears. I didn't mean to, Grandma. It was an accident," Lily stammered. Sarah was already getting up to clean up the mess when Margaret raised her hand, stopping her. "Sit down, Sarah. I'll handle this." The tone was so icy that Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Something was wrong, very wrong. Margaret looked at Lily with a harsh, merciless expression. "Careless girls don't deserve to sit at the table with adults," said Margaret. Sarah felt her heart race. What was Margaret implying? What would you do if you saw someone you love being humiliated in front of you? Leave your answer in the comments, and if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any exciting stories like this one. Sarah froze in her chair, trying to process the words she had just heard. Margaret remained standing, looking at Lily with that cold, calculated expression. The girl's eyes were filled with tears, her lower lip trembling. "Margaret, it was just an accident. She didn't do it on purpose," said Sarah, trying to keep her voice calm, but feeling anger beginning to boil inside. Margaret didn't even look at Sarah. Her eyes remained fixed on Lily. "Lily, get up from the chair," Margaret ordered. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I won't do it again," Lily whimpered, tears beginning to stream down her little face. "Get up." "Now." Margaret's voice was like steel. Lily looked at Sarah, seeking protection, seeking a sign that everything was all right. Sarah was about to stand up when Michael spoke for the first time since they had sat down at the table. "Lily, do what your grandmother is telling you." Sarah turned to him, incredulous. "Michael, you're not serious." He didn't even look up from his plate. "My mother is right. The girl needs to learn to be careful." Victoria crossed her arms, observing everything with an expression of approval. No one was going to defend Lily. No one but Sarah. Lily slowly climbed down from the chair, her legs trembling. She was so small, so fragile at that moment. Margaret picked up the girl's plate, still with food on it, and placed it on the floor beside the table. "If you don't know how to behave like a well-mannered girl, you'll eat over there," Margaret said, pointing to the floor. Sarah felt her world crumble. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't be real. "Margaret, have you gone mad? She's a child. It was an accident," shouted Sarah, jumping up from her chair. "In my house, my rules," Margaret replied unemotionally. And in this house, clumsy children don't sit at the table." Lily looked at the plate on the floor, and then at Sarah, her eyes pleading. "Mommy." Sarah took a step towards her daughter, but Margaret blocked her path. "If you interfere, Sarah, you two can leave now and never come back. Michael has the right to see his daughter, but it doesn't have to be here. I can ask him to pick her up somewhere else." It was a veiled threat. Sarah knew Michael had visitation rights. If she caused a scene and took Lily away, Margaret would make it seem like Sarah was the difficult one, the troublemaker. And Michael, weak as always, would support his mother. Sarah looked at Michael, waiting, pleading with him to do something. But he continued eating, his eyes downcast, pretending that none of this was happening. Victoria smiled, a small, cruel smile. She was enjoying this. Lily started crying louder now. "Mommy, I don't want to. Please." Each sob from the little girl was like a knife in Sarah's heart. She knelt beside her daughter, holding her small face in her hands. "My love, look at me," Sarah whispered, trying to keep her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "You didn't do anything wrong. Can you hear me?" "Nothing." "But Grandma said—" "Grandma is wrong," Sarah said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Margaret scoffed. "I'm teaching respect." "Something you clearly didn't teach." Sarah ignored her. She kissed Lily's forehead and looked into the girl's eyes. "You're going to eat, just this once, but I promise it will never happen again. Never again." Lily nodded, tears wetting her blue dress. Sarah helped her daughter sit on the floor next to the chair. The girl picked up the fork with trembling hands and began to eat, her head down, ashamed. Sarah returned to her chair, but she couldn't eat. She couldn't swallow anything. She sat there, watching her 6-year-old daughter sit on the floor, eating like an animal, while her ex-husband's family continued their dinner as normal. Margaret carved the turkey with precise movements. Victoria laughed at something Michael had said. They talked about the weather, about the football game that would be on later, about trivial things, as if a child wasn't there, humiliated, eating on the floor. Sarah watched each of them. She memorized every face, every expression, every second of that horrible scene. Margaret with her satisfied smile, Victoria with that look of superiority, Michael with his silent cowardice. Lily ate slowly, each bite accompanied by soft sobs. Sarah wanted to scream, wanted to flip the table, wanted to grab her daughter and run away. But she remained seated, silent, planning. Because at that moment, while watching her daughter suffer, Sarah made a decision. She didn't know how, she didn't know when, but one day those people would pay dearly for that humiliation. She would succeed. She would grow. She would become someone they never imagined she could be. And when that day came, she was going to make them feel exactly what Lily was feeling at that moment: despair, humiliation, helplessness. The room was warm, but Sarah was cold, a cold that came from within, chilling her to the bone. She looked around the luxurious house with its perfect decorations and its falseness disguised as refinement. That house represented everything Margaret thought made her superior: the money, the status, the power to humiliate those she considered inferior. Sarah looked at the walls, at the expensive paintings, at the fine wooden furniture, and she thought, one day, all of this will be mine. Not because I want luxury, but because I want justice. Lily finished eating. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, still sitting on the floor, and looked at Sarah with red, swollen eyes. Sarah stood up, picked up the plate from the floor, and placed it in the sink. Then she took her daughter's hand and said in a firm, clear voice, "Let's go." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Already? They haven't even had dessert yet." Sarah looked Margaret straight in the eyes, without blinking, without flinching. "We will never set foot in this house again." Michael finally looked up. "Sarah, don't be dramatic." "Dramatic," Sarah repeated, her voice trembling with suppressed anger. "You let your mother humiliate our daughter. You sat there, silent, eating, while Lily cried on the floor. And you think I'm being dramatic." Victoria rolled her eyes, always making a mountain out of a molehill. Sarah ignored Victoria. She bent down and took Lily in her arms. The little girl buried her face in her mother's neck, still crying softly. "Lily isn't coming here anymore," Sarah said, looking at Michael. "If you want to see your daughter, you'll have to go somewhere else." Margaret stood up, adjusting her pearl necklace. "You can't do that. Michael has rights. And Lily has the right to be treated with dignity," Sarah replied, walking towards the door. Sarah left the house holding Lily in her arms, her steps firm despite her trembling legs. The door slammed shut behind her with a sound that echoed in the silent street. The November chill cut her face, but Sarah barely felt it. The rage burning inside her was stronger than any temperature. Lily's face was still buried in her mother's neck, her sobs quieter now, but still present. Sarah opened the car door and placed her daughter in the back seat, carefully adjusting the seatbelt. Lily's tiny hands gripped her mother's arm. "Mom, was I a bad girl?" Lily asked, her voice breaking. Sarah felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. She knelt beside the car door and looked directly into her daughter's red, swollen eyes. "No, my love, you weren't bad. You've never been bad," Sarah said, holding the little girl's face in her hands. "And what happened in there had nothing to do with you. Do you understand?" Lily shook her head, but her tears continued to fall. "You are perfect. You are my beautiful, intelligent, and loving girl. And no one will ever treat you that way again. I promise." Sarah kissed Lily's forehead several times, wiped away her tears with her thumbs, and closed the car door. Then she got into the driver's seat, closed her eyes for a moment, and took a deep breath. Her hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel. She started the car and drove silently through the streets of Chicago. The city lights were beginning to come on. Families were celebrating Thanksgiving in brightly lit, welcoming homes. Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Lily huddled in the back seat, her eyes fixed on the window, lost in thoughts a 6-year-old shouldn't be having. When they arrived at their small apartment, Sarah carried Lily inside. The apartment was simple, but it was theirs, a place where Lily had always been treated with love and respect. Sarah helped her daughter take off her blue dress and put warm pajamas on her. "Shall we have some hot chocolate?" Sarah offered, trying to bring some comfort to that awful day. Lily simply nodded, too quiet for such a talkative child. Sarah prepared the hot chocolate in the small kitchen, her hands still trembling. She poured 2 mugs and sat on the sofa next to Lily. The girl held her mug with both hands, drinking slowly, her eyes still distant. "Mom, why doesn't Grandma Margaret like me?" Lily asked suddenly. The question pierced Sarah like a spear. She set the mug down on the coffee table and pulled Lily into a tight hug. "My love, this has nothing to do with you. Some people carry so much bitterness inside them that they end up hurting others. Grandma Margaret is one of those people. But I spilled the juice. It was my fault." "No," Sarah said firmly. "Accidents happen. Children spill things. Adults spill things. I spilled coffee myself this morning. That doesn't mean we deserve to be humiliated." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing her mother's words. "Are we never going back there again?" he asked quietly. "Never again," Sarah confirmed. "I promise." That night, Sarah tucked Lily into bed, read her a story, and stayed by her side until she finally fell asleep. But even in her sleep, Lily had a sad expression on her face, as if the nightmares had already begun. Sarah went back into the room and collapsed onto the sofa. The tears she had held back all day finally began to fall. She cried for her daughter, for the humiliation, for the injustice. She cried for the helplessness of not having been able to protect Lily from that horrible moment. But amidst the tears, something began to grow inside Sarah. A fierce determination, an iron will. She looked around the small apartment, at the old furniture, at the bills piled on the small table. She looked at Lily's photo on the shelf, smiling with that beautiful smile that was now stained with pain. Sarah wiped away her tears and picked up her cell phone. She opened her browser and began searching. She looked for online courses, job opportunities, ways to grow professionally. She had settled down after the divorce, working a job that barely paid the bills, accepting the crumbs that life offered. But not anymore. That night, Sarah made a promise to herself. She was going to work harder than ever. She was going to study. She was going to grow. She was going to achieve everything Margaret thought she could never achieve. And one day, when she was at the top, when she had money and power, she was going to make that family pay for what they did to Lily. Margaret thought she was superior because of her big house, her money, her status. But Sarah was going to prove that none of that mattered. What mattered was character, dignity, love, and Sarah had all of that. Margaret had nothing but an empty house and an even emptier heart. Sarah stayed up all night, planning, researching, charting a course. She enrolled in 3 online courses in management and digital marketing. She sent resumes to larger companies. She updated her LinkedIn profile. Every click on the computer was a step toward the future she was determined to build. As the sun began to rise, Sarah was still awake. But for the first time since leaving Margaret's house, she felt something other than anger and sadness. She felt hope and determination. Lily woke up a few hours later and came into the room rubbing her eyes. Sarah opened her arms, and the little girl ran into her mother's lap. "Good morning, my love," said Sarah, kissing the top of Lily's head. "Good morning, Mom. Did you sleep?" Sarah smiled. "Just a little, but I was busy planning our future." Lily looked at her mother curiously. "What kind of future?" "A future where no one will ever make us feel small again. A future where we both have everything we deserve. A better future." Lily smiled for the first time since the previous day. And in that smile, Sarah found all the strength she needed to go on. The following months were the most difficult of Sarah's life. She woke up every day at 5 in the morning, prepared breakfast for Lily, took the girl to school, and went straight to her job as an administrative assistant at an accounting firm in downtown Chicago. The salary was low, but Sarah dedicated herself as if she owned the company. During lunch break, while her colleagues went out to eat at restaurants or relax in the park, Sarah stayed at her desk studying the online courses she had signed up for: digital marketing, business management, investment strategies. Each lesson was a new weapon in her arsenal. At 6 in the afternoon, Sarah would pick Lily up from school and go straight to her second job, as a waitress at an Italian restaurant called Giovanni's. The owner, a 60-year-old Italian man named Antonio, took pity on Sarah and allowed her to bring Lily along. The girl would do her homework at a small table in the back of the restaurant while Sarah served the tables. "Sarah, you're going to kill yourself working like this," Antonio would say every week. "I'm fine, Antonio. I need to do this," Sarah replied with a tired smile. But the truth is, Sarah was exhausted. Her back ached from carrying heavy trays. Her feet swelled inside her tight shoes. Her eyes burned from studying late into the night. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Lily noticed her mother's effort. The girl had become quieter since that Thanksgiving dinner. She no longer talked about her grandmother Margaret, nor did she ask to visit her father. It was as if a part of her childhood joy had been stolen from her that day. Sarah felt guilt tighten her chest every time she looked at her daughter. Guilt for not having prevented the humiliation. Guilt for being so busy now. Guilt for Lily having to spend her evenings at the restaurant instead of playing at home. "Mommy, are you tired?" Lily asked one night, looking at Sarah with those big, worried eyes. Sarah was washing the dishes after they had arrived home. It was past midnight. She dried her hands and bent down to her daughter's level. "I'm a little tired, yes. But do you know why I'm doing all this?" Sarah asked. Lily shook her head. "Because I want us to have a better life. I want you to grow up knowing that you can achieve anything you want. And for that, I need to work hard now. Do you understand?" Lily nodded and hugged her mother tightly. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, my love. More than anything in this world." 3 months after that terrible dinner, Sarah was promoted at her accounting job. It wasn't a big promotion, but it came with a raise. She was called into the office of the manager, a 40-year-old man named Richard, who had noticed Sarah's dedication. "Sarah, I've noticed how dedicated you are here. You arrive early, leave late, and never complain. I want to offer you the position of administrative coordinator," said Richard. Sarah felt her heart race. "Seriously, I don't know what to say." "Say yes. You deserve it. The raise is 20%. 20%. Sarah quickly did the math in her head. With that money, she could maybe quit one of her jobs. She could spend more time with Lily. "I accept. Thank you very much, Richard." When Sarah left the office, She had to hold back tears right there. It was a small step, but it was a step. She was moving up. Slowly, but she was. That night, Sarah bought Lily an ice cream, and the two celebrated in their small apartment. Lily was radiant, happy to see her mother truly smiling for the first time in months. "Mom, does this mean you won't have to work so hard?" Lily asked hopefully. "It means we're getting closer to our dreams," Sarah replied. But Sarah didn't quit her second job. Instead, she started saving every penny she earned. She cut unnecessary expenses, planned every purchase, and saved money as if her life depended on it. Because, in a way, it did. She continued studying. She finished her digital marketing and business management courses with excellent grades. She began applying her knowledge at work, bringing new ideas to the company. Richard was impressed. He started consulting her on important decisions. "Sarah, you have a natural talent for this. Have you ever thought about going to college?" Richard asked one day. Sarah had thought about it, but college cost money and time. Two things she didn't have in abundance. "Maybe someday," Sarah replied. But the seed had been planted. 6 months after Thanksgiving dinner, Sarah had saved $5,000. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She opened a separate savings account and put the money there. That account had a specific purpose. She didn't yet know exactly how, but that money was going to be used to change her life and Lily's. Michael had tried to get in touch several times, messages asking to see Lily, calls that Sarah ignored. He never apologized for what had happened. He never admitted he was wrong. He just wanted to resume the visits as if nothing had happened. Sarah finally replied with a short and direct message. "If you want to see Lily, you can pick her up on Saturday at 10 in the morning here at the apartment, but she's not going to your mother's house anymore. Never again." Michael didn't reply, and he didn't show up on Saturday, nor the next, nor the day after that. Lily stopped asking about her father. Sarah saw the sadness in her daughter's eyes, but she also saw something more: resilience. Lily was learning, even at such a young age, that people show who they really are through their actions, not their words. One night, as Sarah was putting Lily to bed, the little girl held her mother's hand and said, "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be strong like you." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. "You're already strong, my love, stronger than you can imagine." That night, Sarah sat on the sofa and opened her laptop. She had received an email from Richard earlier, talking about an opportunity for advanced training in financial management. The company would pay for the course. Sarah didn't think twice and signed up. Each day was a step. Each course completed, each dollar saved, each promotion earned. Sarah was building something, not just a career, but a future where she would have the power to protect Lily from any humiliation. A future where no one could look at them with disdain. And somewhere deep in Sarah's mind, guarded like a secret treasure, was that promise she had made to herself on that terrible Thanksgiving day. One day, Margaret would pay. One day, justice would be served. A year had passed since that Thanksgiving dinner. A whole year of hard work, sleepless nights, sacrifices, and determination. Sarah had been promoted twice more at the accounting firm. Now she was operations manager, earning a salary she never imagined possible, and had a team of 5 people working under her leadership. Lily was 7 years old, more mature and confident. The girl had started piano lessons and was doing very well in school. The small apartment had been exchanged for a larger one in a better neighborhood. It wasn't luxurious, but it was theirs, earned with sweat and honest work. Sarah continued saving religiously. Her savings account had grown considerably. She had learned about investments, stocks, and real estate investment trusts. Every penny she saved was invested wisely. Antonio, from Giovanni's restaurant, had offered Sarah a partnership in the business. He was getting older and wanted someone trustworthy to help run the place. Sarah accepted, investing part of her savings. In 6 months, the restaurant tripled its revenue thanks to the digital marketing strategies Sarah implemented. Life was getting better. But Sarah never forgot. Every time she looked at Lily, she remembered that 6-year-old girl eating on the floor, humiliated, crying, and the determination to seek justice burned even stronger inside her. It was on an ordinary October morning that Sarah saw the ad. She was having coffee while scrolling through her phone's feed when she stopped on a post about properties for sale in Chicago. And there it was, Margaret's house. Sarah felt her heart race. The photo showed the red brick facade, the well-kept garden, the imposing front door. It was the same house where Lily had been humiliated, the same house where Margaret had felt superior and powerful. Sarah clicked on the ad and read the details carefully. The house was being sold for $450,000. The ad mentioned that the owners needed to sell quickly for financial reasons. Financial reasons. Sarah read those words several times, letting the meaning sink in. Margaret, who had always boasted of her wealth and status, was having financial problems. Sarah couldn't believe the coincidence. Or maybe it wasn't a coincidence. Maybe it was justice finally arriving. She began to research more information. She discovered that Michael had lost his job 6 months ago and was having difficulty finding another in the same field. Victoria was going through an expensive and complicated divorce. And Margaret, who had mortgaged the house years ago to maintain her luxurious lifestyle, could no longer afford the monthly payments. The house had been on the market for 3 months without any serious offers. The price was below market value. Margaret was clearly desperate to sell. Sarah felt something growing inside her. An idea began to take shape in her mind. A bold idea, perhaps even crazy, but perfectly possible. What if she bought the house? The thought left her breathless for a moment. Buying Margaret's house, the house where Lily had been humiliated, the house that represented everything Margaret thought made her superior. Sarah picked up the phone and called her bank manager, a man named Thomas, who had become a financial advisor after Sarah began to prosper. "Thomas, I need to talk to you about something important. Can you see me today?" "Sure, Sarah. What time works for you?" "Can I go now?" Thomas must have sensed the urgency in Sarah's voice. "Come now. I'll be waiting for you." Sarah left Lily with the neighbor, saying she had an important work meeting, and drove to the bank. When she entered Thomas's office, her hands were trembling slightly. "Sarah, are you all right? You seem agitated," said Thomas, indicating a chair. Sarah sat down and took a deep breath. "Thomas, I've found a property I want to buy, but it's a delicate situation. I need to know if it's financially viable." She showed Thomas the house listing. He studied the details, made some notes, and opened programs on his computer to check market values and the property's history. "The house is in an excellent location," Thomas said after a few minutes. "The price is definitely below market value, which suggests the sellers are motivated to close the deal quickly. With the money you've invested and saved, plus financing, it's entirely possible to make this purchase." Sarah felt her heart race. It was real. She really could do this. "Thomas, I want to make an offer, but there are specific conditions that need to be met." "What are the conditions?" "The purchase must be made through a company. The sellers cannot know who is buying, at least not until the entire transaction is complete and finalized." Thomas frowned, curious. "That can be arranged. We can create an LLC for the transaction. It's common in real estate deals when the buyer wants privacy." "May I ask why?" Sarah looked Thomas straight in the eyes. "Because the sellers are people who have hurt me a lot, and I want them to find out who bought their house only when it's too late to turn back." Thomas was silent for a moment, processing the information. Then he nodded slowly. "I understand. I'll take care of everything. We'll create the company today and prepare the documentation for the offer." Sarah spent the next few hours at the bank, signing papers, discussing strategies, and organizing financing. Thomas suggested a generic name for the company, something that wouldn't reveal anything about Sarah. "How about Phoenix Rising LLC?" Sarah suggested suddenly. "Phoenix Rising? Interesting. Any special meaning?" Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the bank. "The phoenix rising from the ashes. Yes, it has a very special meaning." By the end of the day, everything was ready. The company was established, the documents prepared, the money organized. Sarah hired a lawyer specializing in real estate transactions, an experienced man named Daniel, who would be responsible for all communication with the sellers. Daniel: "It's very important that my identity remains secret until the sale is completely closed." "The sellers can't know it's me," Sarah emphasized. "Understood. This will be kept in absolute secrecy. All communications will be made on behalf of Phoenix Rising LLC. Sarah returned home that night, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. Lily was having dinner with the neighbor when she arrived. "Mom, how was the meeting?" Lily asked, running to hug Sarah. Sarah hugged her daughter tightly. "That was very good, my love. Very good indeed." That night, after putting Lily to bed, Sarah stayed awake thinking. She was about to do something huge, something that would change everything. The offer would be sent tomorrow morning, and then it would just be a matter of waiting to see if Margaret would accept. Sarah looked out the apartment window at the city lights shimmering in the darkness. Something was beginning. Something that had been set in motion exactly a year ago, on that dreadful Thanksgiving day. Justice was coming. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a strange feeling in her stomach. It was a mixture of anxiety and determination. Today was the day. The offer would be officially sent to Margaret. Sarah prepared breakfast for Lily, helped the girl get ready for school, and dropped her off at the gate as she always did. But her mind was completely focused on what was about to happen. At 9 in the morning, Sarah was sitting in Daniel's office. The lawyer had all the documents prepared on his desk. The offer was typed, printed, ready to be sent. "Let's review the terms one last time," said Daniel, adjusting his glasses. "Phoenix Rising LLC is offering $420,000 for the property, cash payment and approved financing. No complicated contingencies. It's a clean and attractive offer for sellers who need to close a deal quickly." Sarah nodded. "Perfect. Send it now." Daniel picked up the phone and called the real estate agent representing Margaret. Sarah watched as he spoke, explaining the terms of the offer, confirming the details. When Daniel hung up, he looked at Sarah and said, "That's it. The offer has been officially submitted. Now we just have to wait for the response." Sarah left the office and went to work, but she couldn't concentrate on anything. Every time her cell phone rang, her heart raced. She compulsively checked her email, hoping for some news. The hours passed slowly. Sarah attended meetings, answered emails, supervised her team, but everything seemed to be happening in slow motion. Her mind was completely elsewhere. On the other side of town, Margaret sat at the kitchen table of the house that would soon no longer be hers. The real estate agent had just called with news of an offer. A real, serious offer, with real money. $420,000? Margaret repeated into the phone, her voice trembling. $30,000 less than we're asking. Yes, Mrs. Margaret, but it's a clean offer. No complications. The buyer has the money and the financing already approved. They want to close quickly. Considering the house has been on the market for 3 months without other offers, I strongly recommend you accept. Margaret looked around the kitchen. The boxes were already stacked in the corners. She had no choice. The debts were suffocating her. The bank was pressuring her. She needed this money. "Who is the buyer?" Margaret asked. "A company called Phoenix Rising LLC. This is common in real estate transactions. Investors often use companies to buy properties." "Investors," Margaret repeated with a sigh. Her beautiful house, where she had lived for 30 years, where she had raised her children, where she had made so many memories, was going to be sold to investors. It would probably be renovated and resold for a higher price. But she had no choice. "I accept the offer," said Margaret, her voice defeated. "Excellent decision, Mrs. Margaret. I will prepare all the documentation. We can close the deal in 30 days. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon when Sarah's cell phone rang. It was Daniel. "Sarah, I have news. They accepted the offer." Sarah was in a meeting when she received the call. She apologized and left the conference room, walking to a private area. "They accepted?" Sarah repeated, needing to make sure she had heard correctly. "Yes. Mrs. Margaret has accepted all the terms. We will begin the closing process immediately. In 30 days, the house will officially be yours. Sarah leaned against the wall, her legs growing weak. It had worked. It really had worked. Margaret had accepted the offer without having any idea who was buying her house. Daniel, did they ask who the buyer was? They asked. I informed them that it was Phoenix Rising LLC, an investment company. Nothing more. They know absolutely nothing about you. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Great, perfect, keep it up. No information about me until everything is finalized. Understood. I'll keep you updated on each step of the process. Sarah returned to the meeting, but her mind was elsewhere. She had just taken the most important step in her plan. Margaret's house would be hers, officially, legally, irrevocably. The following weeks were a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Sarah followed every step of the process. The property inspection was carried out. The documents were reviewed by lawyers from both sides. The financing was processed. The signatures were collected. Margaret continued packing her things, completely unaware of the buyer's true identity. She sold furniture, donated objects, and prepared to leave the house that had been her castle for decades. Michael, also unknowingly, helped his mother with the boxes. Victoria would occasionally show up, complaining about her own financial situation without any idea of what was to come. Sarah maintained her normal routine. She worked, took care of Lily, and studied. But inside, she counted the days. Each passing day was one day closer to the moment when she would finally have justice. Lily could tell that something was different about her mother. "Mom, you've been happier lately," the girl remarked one evening during dinner. Sarah smiled and stroked her daughter's hair. "I am, my love. Good things are happening." "What kind of good things?" "You'll find out soon, very soon." Finally, after 28 days of paperwork, inspections, and processing, the closing day arrived. Sarah went to the notary's office accompanied by Daniel. Margaret was there too, with her own lawyer, but in a separate room. The two sides did not meet. Sarah signed document after document. Each signature was a victory. Each initial was a step closer to the justice she had promised herself. When the final signature was made, the notary official stamped the documents and said, "Congratulations, Mrs. Johnson. You are officially the new owner of the property." Sarah held the deed in her hands. Her name was there, printed in black and white. Sarah Johnson, legal owner of the house located at the address where Margaret had reigned as queen for 3 decades. "The keys?" Sarah asked. Daniel handed over a bunch of keys. "Here they are. The property is all yours now." Sarah put the keys in her bag. She wasn't going to the house yet. Not yet. First, she needed Margaret to know. She needed to see the woman's face when she found out who had bought her precious house. "Daniel, I need you to schedule a meeting with the previous owners. At the house. I want to speak with them in person." Daniel hesitated. "Sarah, technically you don't need to do that. The house is already yours. They have to vacate according to the contract." "I know, but I want to do this. I need to do this." Daniel nodded, understanding that something deeper was going on there. "I'll contact their lawyer and schedule the meeting." Sarah left the notary's office with the deed in her hands. She got into her car and sat there for a moment, just looking at the document. A year ago, she was a humiliated woman, watching her daughter be treated as less than human. Now, she was the owner of that family's home. Sarah started her car and drove back to work. She safely stored the deed on her desk. No one in the office knew what had just happened. To everyone, it was just another normal workday for Sarah. But it wasn't a normal day. It was the day everything had changed. It was the day Sarah had become more than a victim. She had become someone with power, someone Margaret would have to face as an equal, or rather, as a superior. The meeting was scheduled for a week later. Daniel contacted Margaret's lawyer and informed him that the new owner would like to meet in person with the former owners to discuss some details regarding the eviction from the property. Margaret found it strange, but agreed. She imagined that perhaps the investor wanted to buy some furniture or discuss the timeline for the move. She had no idea what was really to come. Sarah spent that week planning every detail. She chose her clothes carefully. An elegant gray suit, high heels, her hair loose and neatly styled. Discreet but professional makeup. She wanted to look successful, confident, powerful. On the morning of the meeting, Sarah left Lily at the neighbor's house. The girls still didn't know anything about the house. Sarah wanted to protect her from any confrontation. Sarah drove to Margaret's house. It was a cold, late November morning, almost exactly a year after that terrible Thanksgiving dinner. Daniel was waiting in his car, parked in front of the house. "Are you ready?" Daniel asked. "More than ready. I've been ready for a year." They climbed the steps to the veranda together. Sarah felt a surge of emotions as she rang the doorbell. The last time she had been there, she had left carrying Lily in her arms, crying, humiliated. Today, she returned as the owner of the property. The door opened. Margaret was there, dressed simply, without expensive jewelry. She looked older, more tired. When her eyes met Sarah's, the confusion was immediate. "Sarah," said Margaret, her voice thick with surprise. "What are you doing here?" Sarah didn't answer. She simply went into the house, passing Margaret without asking permission. It was her house now, after all. The room was very different. The walls that once held expensive paintings were bare. Fine wooden furniture had vanished. Only a few basic pieces remained, and dozens of boxes were piled up everywhere. Michael was sitting on the sofa. When he saw Sarah, he immediately stood up, confused. Victoria entered from the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee. When she saw Sarah, she stopped, her mouth opening in surprise. "What's going on?" Victoria asked. Daniel went in behind Sarah and closed the door. He opened his leather briefcase and took out some documents. "Mrs. Margaret, Mr. Michael, Mrs. Victoria, this is Sarah Johnson, the new owner of this property." The silence that followed was absolute. Margaret shook her head slowly, as if unable to process the words. "What?" whispered Margaret. "No, that can't be true." "That's right," Sarah said, her voice calm and firm. "I bought your house, Margaret, through Phoenix Rising LLC, and now, officially and legally, this property belongs to me." Margaret staggered, needing to lean against the wall. Her face went pale. "No, you don't have the money for that. You can't." "But I can, and I did." Daniel held out the deed for everyone to see. "Here's the documentation. Everything's legal. Everything's registered. This house is mine." Michael stepped forward, his hands trembling. "Sarah, this is crazy. Why would you do this?" Sarah turned to him. "Do you really need to ask, Michael? Don't you really know why?" Victoria found her voice, sharp and desperate. "You can't just come in here like this and—" "Yes, I can," said Sarah, "because this house is now legally mine. I have the deed. I have all the documents." Margaret began to cry. Loud, desperate sobs. She covered her face with her hands, her body trembling. Sarah watched the scene. Part of her felt pity, but then she remembered. She remembered Lily sitting on the floor, crying, eating as if she were less than human, and any trace of pity vanished. "Do you remember me, Margaret?" Sarah asked. "That woman you thought wasn't good enough for your son? That mother whose daughter you humiliated, making her eat off the floor like an animal?" Margaret took her hands away from her face, her eyes red and swollen. "Sarah, please. Do you remember that day? Do you remember how you put my daughter's plate on the floor? How you made a 6-year-old child feel inferior?" "I was wrong," Margaret stammered. "I know I was wrong. I apologize. I shouldn't have done that." "You're right. You shouldn't have done it," Sarah said. "But you did, and now, a year later, here we are." Michael tried to intervene. "Sarah, look, my mother already apologized. What do you want?" "This is about justice. It's about dignity. It's about showing you that you can't just humiliate people and get away with it." Victoria crossed her arms. "So you bought our house to get revenge." "That's pathetic." "Pathetic," Sarah repeated. Do you know what's pathetic? It's watching a child being humiliated and doing nothing. It's staying silent while their mother commits a terrible cruelty. Margaret slumped into a chair, her body hunched in utter defeat. Sarah, please, we have nowhere to go. Michael lost his job. Victoria is going through a divorce. I've lost everything. Please, have mercy. Sarah looked at Margaret, the woman who a year ago had seemed so powerful. Now she was there, broken, begging. You have 30 days to completely vacate this property, Sarah said, as stipulated in the sales contract you signed. Margaret, 30 days. Margaret looked up. 30 days isn't enough. We need more time. Lily needed respect. She needed dignity. She received neither. Daniel stepped forward. Mr. Michael, Mrs. Margaret, Mrs. Victoria, you have been formally notified. 30 days from today. The room fell silent. Margaret wept softly. Michael stared at the floor. Victoria was pale. Sarah looked around the room one last time. This house had represented everything Margaret thought made her superior. But now the house belonged to Sarah. Sarah walked toward the door. Before leaving, she stopped and looked back. You taught me something important that day. You taught me that the world can be cruel, but you also taught me that I can be stronger than any cruelty. Sarah left the house with Daniel by her side. The door closed behind her with a final sound. As Sarah descended the steps from the balcony, a question lingered in the air. What would you do if you had the chance to confront the person who humiliated you? Leave your opinion in the comments. Sarah didn't return home for the next 2 weeks. She continued her normal routine, working, caring for Lily, living her life. But deep down, she knew something was coming. Margaret wasn't going to simply accept everything without trying one last time. And Sarah was right. It was on a rainy afternoon in December that Sarah received a call from Daniel. Sarah, Mrs. Margaret is trying to get in touch with you. She called the office several times today asking to speak with you in person. Sarah was silent for a moment. What does she want? She didn't say specifically, but she seems desperate. She's begging for a meeting. Sarah thought. Part of her wanted to simply ignore Margaret, let the 30 days pass and the family leave the house. But another part of her, a curious part, wanted to hear what Margaret had to say. Schedule a meeting, but this time at my house, on my territory. Are you sure, Sarah? I have it. I want her to come to me. The meeting was scheduled for the next day. Sarah tidied up the apartment, making everything organized and comfortable. She didn't want to seem desperate or needy. She wanted to show that she was okay, that she had built a good life for herself and Lily. Lily was at school when Margaret arrived. Sarah opened the door and found a woman completely different from the one she had seen 2 weeks ago. Margaret was visibly thinner, with deep dark circles under her eyes, and her hair was disheveled. She was wearing ordinary, unglamorous clothes. Sarah, said Margaret, her voice trembling, thank you for having me. Sarah stepped aside, allowing Margaret to enter. The apartment was simple, but clean and cozy. Photos of Lily decorated the walls. Books were stacked on the shelf. A real home, built with love. Margaret looked around, her eyes absorbing every detail. She seemed uncomfortable, out of place. Sit down, said Sarah, pointing to the sofa. Margaret sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap. Sarah sat in the armchair opposite, keeping her distance. What do you want, Margaret? Margaret took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. I came to ask for forgiveness. Truly, not just empty words. I came to ask for a second chance. Sarah said nothing. She just waited. I know what I did was terrible, Margaret continued, her voice breaking. I know there's no excuse for the way I treated you and Lily. I was wrong, completely wrong. You already said that, Sarah replied coldly. I know, but this time, I truly understand the gravity of what I did. Margaret began to cry, tears falling freely. Sarah, I lost everything, my home, my pride, my status, and you know what? I deserved it. I deserve to lose everything because of what I did to you. Sarah watched Margaret cry, but her heart remained hardened. She had heard apologies before. Words were easy. Actions were what mattered. Margaret, you're not here because you're sorry. You're here because you lost everything. If you were still in that big house, with your money and your status, you wouldn't even look at me in the street. Margaret shook her head vigorously. No, Sarah, it's not like that. I truly regret it. These last few weeks have made me realize a lot. I was a horrible person. I judged you for not having money, for coming from a simple family. But now I see that you have something I never had. What? Dignity, strength, true love for her daughter. Margaret wiped away tears with the back of her hand. I look at you and I see a mother who worked hard, who sacrificed everything for her daughter, who never gave up. And I look at myself and I see an empty woman who used money and status to feel superior. Sarah remained silent. Margaret's words sounded sincere, but Sarah had learned not to trust easily. Margaret continued, I know you have no reason to forgive me. I know what I'm asking is impossible. But Sarah, I'm begging you, please give us more time. Just 60 more days. Michael is trying to get a job. Victoria is trying to recover from the divorce. We just need a little more time. So what, Margaret? Are you going to find another place and continue your lives as if nothing happened? No, said Margaret, her voice firm now. We'll learn. I'll learn. I promise I'll be a better person. I promise I'll ask Lily for forgiveness if you let me. I want to look at that little girl and apologize for what I did. Sarah felt something stir inside her. The mention of Lily brought all the emotions back. The anger, the pain, the humiliation. Lily doesn't need your apologies, Margaret. She doesn't even remember you anymore. And that's for the best. But I need to make these apologies, Margaret insisted, not for myself, but because it's the right thing to do. Sarah got up and walked to the window, looking out at the street outside. The rain was falling heavily. People were running with umbrellas. Life went on, indifferent to the drama unfolding in that apartment. Sarah, please. Margaret's voice came from behind her. I know I don't deserve your mercy, but I'm begging anyway. Sarah turned around and saw something she never imagined she would see. Margaret had gotten up from the sofa and was kneeling on the floor, her hands clasped in supplication, tears streaming down her face. Please, Margaret pleaded, her voice broken and desperate. Have mercy on us. I make mistakes. I was cruel. I was terrible. But please, give us a second chance. Just more time. Sarah looked at Margaret, kneeling on the floor. The woman who a year ago had seemed like a queen now lay there, broken, pleading. Sarah should feel satisfied. She should feel that justice had finally been served. But all she felt was emptiness. Get up, Margaret, Sarah said in a tired voice. Margaret didn't move. Not until you give me an answer. Please, Sarah. I told you to get up. Margaret slowly rose to her feet, using the sofa for support. She stood there, her red eyes fixed on Sarah, waiting. Sarah took a deep breath. Margaret, you asked me if I'm going to give you a second chance, and my answer is no. Margaret let out a loud sob, her body shaking as if she had been punched. But not because I don't believe you're sorry, Sarah continued, and not because I want revenge. It's because actions have consequences. You made a choice that day. You chose to humiliate an innocent child. You chose to put your pride above compassion. And now, you have to live with the consequences of those choices. Sarah, please. I'm not going to change the 30-day deadline, Margaret. The contract has been signed. The law will be enforced. You have to leave the house within the established time frame. Margaret fell back onto the sofa, her face in her hands, crying uncontrollably. Sarah continued, her voice firm. But I'm going to do one thing for you. Not because you deserve it, but because I'm not you. I'm not going to throw your belongings away. You can take whatever you want. And I'm going to recommend you to a housing assistance program that can help you find temporary housing. Margaret lifted her face, surprise mixed with pain. You would do this? After everything? I do this because I learned something you never knew, Margaret. I learned that being strong doesn't mean being cruel. Being powerful doesn't mean humiliating others. And having justice doesn't mean losing your humanity. Sarah took a business card from a drawer and handed it to Margaret. Here. This is the contact information for a social worker who works with families in transition. Give her a call. She can help. Margaret took the card with trembling hands, looking at it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "Thank you," whispered Margaret. "Sarah, thank you." Sarah walked to the door and opened it. "The 30 days remain, Margaret, but you won't be on the street. Not if I can help." Margaret stood up and walked to the door. Before leaving, she stopped and looked at Sarah one last time. "I'm so sorry. Truly. And I hope that one day, perhaps, you can forgive me completely." "Maybe someday," Sarah said. "But today is not that day." Margaret left. Sarah closed the door and leaned against it, closing her eyes. She had done it. She had stood her ground. She hadn't given in to emotional manipulation, but she hadn't lost her humanity either. Sarah picked up the phone and called Daniel. "Daniel, I need you to prepare the official eviction documents. The 30-day period will be respected. No extensions. Understood. I'll take care of everything." Sarah hung up and sat on the sofa where Margaret had been minutes before. She looked around the apartment, at Lily's photos, at the life she had built. She had won. She had achieved justice. But somehow, the victory didn't taste as sweet as she had imagined. It tasted of ashes, of the end of a chapter, of closure. Sarah took a picture of Lily and held it against her chest. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting her daughter. It was about showing that dignity cannot be taken away, only given. And Sarah had never given up hers, not even when I was eating on the floor. The 30 days passed quickly. Sarah didn't return home during that time. She let Daniel handle all the legal details, all the communication with Margaret and the family. Sarah focused on her work, on Lily, on planning the future. Lily still didn't know about the house. Sarah had decided to wait until everything was settled before telling her daughter. She didn't want to involve the girl in the drama, the tension, the confrontation. Lily deserved only peace and happiness. On the 29th day, Daniel called Sarah. "Sarah, the family has finished removing all their belongings from the house. They left last night. The property is officially vacant and ready for you." Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. It was real. It was done. Did they leave a message? "Margaret left the keys in the mailbox with a letter. I picked them up for you." "A letter?" "Yes, it's sealed. Addressed to you." Sarah wasn't sure if she wanted to read that letter. Part of her simply wanted to move on, to close that chapter completely. But another part of her was curious. "Okay, I'll stop by your office to pick it up." Sarah went to Daniel's office at the end of the day. He handed her the house keys and a white envelope with Sarah's name handwritten on it in shaky handwriting. Sarah put the envelope in her bag without opening it. "Thank you for everything, Daniel. You were essential in this process." "It was a pleasure to help, Sarah. And if you need anything related to the property, you can give me a call." Sarah drove to the house. It was a cold but sunny December afternoon. When she parked in front of the property, she sat there for a moment, just looking. The house looked different now, less intimidating, less imposing. It was just a house, bricks, wood, glass, nothing more. Sarah got out of the car and climbed the porch steps. She grabbed her keys and opened the front door. The creaking of the door echoed through the empty house. Sarah entered slowly. The interior was completely empty. No furniture, no paintings, no decorations. The walls had marks where the furniture had been. The wooden floor was scratched in places, but the structure was solid, beautiful. Sarah walked across the living room, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. She entered the kitchen where Margaret had prepared that terrible Thanksgiving dinner. The kitchen was clean, but old. It would need renovations. Sarah went upstairs and explored the rooms. 3 large bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Enough space for her and Lily to live comfortably. Space to grow, to breathe, to build new and happy memories. Sarah went back into the living room and sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. She took the envelope out of her bag and finally opened it. The letter was handwritten, Margaret's handwriting a little shaky, but legible. Dear Sarah, as I write this letter, I am packing the last of my belongings from this house that has been mine for 30 years. It's strange how things change. A year ago, I was the queen of this castle. Today, I'm just a silly old woman who lost everything because of her own pride. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I truly learned my lesson. Life has a funny way of teaching us humility, and I was taught the hard way. This house has witnessed many things: joys, sorrows, celebrations, conflicts, and it also witnessed my worst moment as a human being, the moment I humiliated your daughter. I hope you transform this house into something better than I did. I hope you fill these rooms with love, laughter, and kindness. Things I never managed to do right. Take good care of this house, Sarah, and take good care of Lily. She's lucky to have a mother like you. With sincere regret, Margaret Sarah folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. She sat there on the floor of the empty house for a long time, thinking, reflecting. Margaret was right about one thing. It was time to transform that house into something better, something full of love and life. Sarah picked up the phone and called a renovation company. She scheduled a meeting for the following week to discuss the changes she wanted to make. Fresh paint, a remodeled kitchen, a replanted garden. She was going to completely transform that house. In the following weeks, Sarah immersed herself in the renovation project. She chose light and cheerful colors for the walls. She installed a modern and functional kitchen. She renovated the bathrooms. She sanded and varnished the wooden floors. She planted flowers in the garden. Lily still didn't know. Sarah wanted it to be a complete surprise. It was one morning in January that Sarah finally told Lily. "My love, Mommy has a surprise for you today," Sarah said during breakfast. Lily looked up, curious. What kind of surprise? A very special surprise. "We're going for a drive." Sarah drove home with Lily in the back seat, chattering excitedly about school, about the friends, about the weekend plans. When Sarah parked in front of the house, Lily looked out the window, confused. "Why did we stop here, Mom?" Sarah got out of the car and opened the back door, helping Lily out. "Come with me." They climbed the steps to the balcony together. Sarah opened the door and went inside with Lily. The house had been completely transformed. The walls were painted in soft, welcoming colors. New, comfortable furniture filled the living room. Light curtains hung on the windows, letting in the sunlight. Photos of Sarah and Lily adorned the walls. A true home. Lily looked around, her eyes wide. "Mommy, what a beautiful house! Whose is it?" Sarah knelt down to her daughter's level and held her tiny hands. "This is ours, my love. This is our new home." Lily blinked several times, processing the information. "Wow, we're going to live here." "Yes, Mom bought this house for us. It's all ours." Lily squealed with joy and jumped into Sarah's arms, hugging her mother tightly. "Seriously, Mommy, we have a real house, a big house." Sarah laughed, hugging her daughter tightly to her chest. "Yes, my love, a real house. Our house." Lily ran off to explore, climbing stairs, opening doors, shouting with excitement at each discovery. Sarah followed her, smiling at her daughter's pure joy. "Mom, can I choose which room is mine?" asked Lily, standing in the second-floor hallway. "You can choose whichever one you want." Lily went into each room, assessing and comparing. Finally, she chose the room with the window overlooking the garden. "This one. I want this one." Sarah followed her daughter into the room. It was Victoria's room, but now it would be Lily's, and it would be filled with love, toys, dreams, and happiness. "So this is your room," Sarah said. "We'll decorate it however you like." Lily hugged Sarah again. "Thank you, Mom. You're the best mom in the world." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes, tears of joy this time, tears of relief, tears of accomplishment. She had succeeded. She had transformed pain into strength, humiliation into determination, revenge into justice, and finally, justice into a new beginning. That house was no longer the place where Lily had been humiliated. Now it was the place where Lily would grow up loved, protected, and valued. Sarah looked out the bedroom window at the garden outside, with its new flowers beginning to bloom. It was a new beginning, for both of them, and this time it would be different. It would be better. It would be theirs. November arrived again, and Sarah was in the kitchen preparing Thanksgiving dinner, but this time, everything was different. The kitchen smelled of roasting turkey, apple pie, and cinnamon. Lily was in the living room, decorating the table with flowers they had picked together in the garden that morning. The girl hummed happily, her yellow dress twirling as she danced from side to side. "Mom, the table looks beautiful!" Lily shouted from the living room. Sarah wiped her hands on her apron and went to see. The table was truly beautiful. Light tablecloth, simple but pretty dishes, lily flowers in the center, nothing luxurious, but full of love. "It's perfect, my love. You did an amazing job." Sarah had invited Antonio from the restaurant and the neighbor who always helped with Lily. It wasn't a crowd, but they were people who truly cared about them. Real people. When the guests arrived, the house filled with laughter, conversation, and warmth. They sat down at the table, and Sarah served the food she had prepared with so much care. "Let's make a toast," said Antonio, raising his glass. "To Sarah, who taught us that true strength comes from resilience, and to little Lily, who lights up any place she goes." Everyone toasted. Sarah looked around the table and felt her chest swell with gratitude. This was her family now, not by blood, but by choice. Lily ate with relish, laughing at Antonio's funny stories. She sat at the table, surrounded by love and respect, just as it should have been from the beginning. Sarah looked at her daughter and remembered that terrible day, 2 years ago. Lily eating on the floor, crying, humiliated. The pain of that memory still existed, but it had lost its power. Because now, looking at Lily happy and safe, Sarah knew she had done the right thing. Not just buying the house or confronting Margaret, but transforming the pain into something productive, into growth, into love. After dinner, when the guests had already left and Lily was asleep in her room, Sarah went out onto the balcony. The night was cold and starry. She looked out onto the street, at the neighboring houses with their lights on, families celebrating together. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt truly at peace. The journey had been long and difficult. It had required sacrifice, hard work, and determination. But it had been worth it. Sarah was no longer the frightened woman she had been 2 years earlier. She was stronger, wiser, more complete. And Lily was growing up in an environment where dignity and respect were non-negotiable. Sarah smiled at the stars. "We did it," she whispered to the night. "We really did it." And as she returned inside the house, to the warmth of the home she had built with her own hands, Sarah knew that this was only the beginning of an even better story. A story of love, strength, and new beginnings. Their story. Sarah and Lily's story teaches us something powerful about dignity and resilience. When faced with humiliation and injustice, we have 2 choices: let it destroy us, or use that pain as fuel to grow. Sarah chose to grow. She transformed the worst experience of her life into motivation to build something better, not just to get revenge, but to ensure her daughter never had to go through that again. True strength doesn't come from humiliating others. It comes from getting up after being knocked down. It comes from maintaining your dignity even when they try to take it away from you. It comes from transforming pain into purpose. Think about your own life. Have you ever been in a situation where you were treated unfairly? How did you react? What lesson did this story teach you? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to continue receiving inspiring stories like this one.